where is the Democratic Party in terms of like being able to deal with this? What's your take? Let's just start with this AOC committee chair race. What's your takeaway? I mean, she seemed to argue that 84 votes was good. It gives a marker. She wanted to win. She thought she could win maybe, but that 84 votes is a good marker as to like where the balance of power across various different planes, if you will, exist.
And here's the saddest part, that she's right about that when it comes to the perspective of members of the House. Like Democratic members of the House genuinely were surprised that she got as many as 84 votes. And like the sad part is that A, it's only 84 votes, and B, that they're surprised about that, and C, that it shows that they actually don't have any interest in radically rethinking the way that they do politics.
Yeah.
Like if they, like a shellacking like this to some institutions would yield a radical rethinking of what they're doing. All right, what have we done wrong here? What has been working? What works for us that we can put out in front? What can we do differently? Instead, they're comparing themselves to 2022, 2018, saying like, hey, it's the fourth term, you know, she's coming into her fourth term and she won 84 votes. Like that's historic compared to what it was like in the 90s or what it was like in the 1950s and what it was like in the 1930s. So they're still stuck in this thinking of themselves as this long continuous institution that changes extremely slowly while the entire world is spinning around them at an exponentially faster rate and breaking them while they're not even noticing.
I had Dan on the other day on his piece, you know, how the Democrats are rudderless. I mean, because when you say they, it's almost like giving they too much credit as if they are an entity, as opposed to just, you know, a bunch of people who just happen to find themselves in the same cloakroom. And, you know, maybe within, you know, somewhat aligned in terms of policies, but, you know, some not, frankly. And there seems to be such a massive vacuum of leadership. And I'm not even talking like, I'm not even talking about somebody who's like actively being a leader, but like to look to Chuck Schumer for any type of direction, right? I mean, in many respects, he's the most senior, he's the most senior elected official, a Democrat. And to look to him for any type of like signal of like, where should we head is like, it's like some type of like Escher painting. Like all you're doing is you're looking back at yourself somehow. Like you look at him and you just see you're looking into the mirror.
So Democrats have spent 40 years now, basically since Reagan, being not Republicans rather than being anything, which makes for, like you said, a coalition of people who look around at the cloakroom and are like, what do we have in common other than the fact that like we're not Republicans? And Republicans are now changing, you know, substantially. Like the Republican Party of 2024 is not the Republican Party of 94 or 2004. And so if you're a party that has no identity other than not being Republicans, but Republicans are all changing in weird ways that are confusing to you, then what are you?
Right.
Rudderless is what they are. Yeah.
Do you see like where, like, I mean, I guess it's just a question of like, it's impossible to sort of predict who emerges as a leader out of this. I mean, certainly that vote in the House was like some sense of like, well, we definitely don't think it's going to be AOC, or we don't want it to be AOC.
It's Jerry Connolly.
Jerry Connolly. I mean,
I'm excited already.
Of all the esophageal cancer patients in their 70s, he would be the one I would want. No, I would say that. Like, let's be honest. For a guy who has esophageal cancer and in that age, he's got some pep in his step, and that's
now or never, Jerry. Yeah.
DEI hire. Yeah. I mean, I guess but that I guess brings us to the Wall Street Journal 50 sourced piece that came out this week about Biden, which we went through yesterday. And the leadership vacuum that he's left is, I think, one of the worst parts of his legacy, the genocide that he supported. Pretty big stain. But that element of them knowing as soon as 2019 that they didn't want Jill Biden out there because she looked more energetic than her husband, 8 years younger than him. You're already doing that kind of management. And then, frankly, it's why Harris was in the closet. They weren't putting her out there to highlight that contrast either. So Biden consciously undercut any other leadership opportunities for Democrats that were rising. Didn't even need to be her, and it probably wouldn't have been at the end of the day. But because it was all this group of sycophants insulating him from questioning, and also making sure that there was no question. He's the president. That's it.
Yeah, we just reshared on the Dropsite Twitter feed the Julian Castro debate moment from 2020, if you remember, where
Yes.
he was basically driven out of the race for calling out Biden for being, mentally infirm. In 2019, if you remember, when Biden was campaigning in Iowa, there were all these stories about how he would speak to audiences of, say, 50 people. 10 of those would go in as supporters, and 2 would emerge still supporting him, because of his sheer inability to string sentences together or to seem remotely presidential. This was 2019 in Iowa. He then finished 4th in Iowa as a result, because Iowa voters
Get up close. Yeah.
actually saw him, and they're like, no, this is ridiculous. Then he finished 5th in New Hampshire, because New Hampshire voters also get to see people up close. And then in Nevada, it's 2-person race between him and Bernie. Bernie beats him 2-1.
Yep.
Democratic voters knew in 2019 that this guy was not ready to be president. They were looking for anybody but him. And then they're just told by Obama and Clyburn and Buttigieg and Klobuchar and MSNBC and CNN, with their hundreds of millions of dollars of earned, unearned media, saying look, everybody's consolidating behind Biden to beat Bernie. And
to be fair,
okay, yeah.
Listen, there was a real fear amongst a lot of us that if Bernie won, we would be lined up in Central Park and shot because of
look at
being
Luigi
on the wrong side.
Mangione. I
Yes.
mean, later we'll play Eric
He would've-
Adams saying how we need to respect CEO trauma right now, and that there's not enough of sensitivity about this class of individual and their trauma.
And for viewers who've forgotten, that's it. Chris Matthews said that on air.
I was in that room that night and went up afterwards on the air, and I was like, well, "Excuse me, what are we talking about here?" And but and that is on Obama, right? There's, why Chuck Schumer, somehow Chuck Schumer's not in that Wall Street Journal piece, right? I mean, you can almost hear
you could hear his aides speaking anonymously. Yeah.
Yes, but you can hear Chuck Schumer himself running as far away from any mention in that piece as possible. But the fact is where was Chuck Schumer 2 years ago, who was the titular head of the league? Where was Barack Obama? I understand. Listen, I've been in that business. You got to be available for meetings. If you're pitching a show, you guys, when you're coming up with a show, you're that's the whole world you're inhabiting. What are the characters like? What's going to be the arc? But if you're going to dip in to the election, the primaries, which okay, anybody can be a political actor, but do you have no sense of obligation to sort of if you're going to exercise that kind of power, do you, my Uncle Ben used to say to me, with great power comes great responsibility. And I mean, honestly, it's so ridiculous the way that these people are operating. And I feel the same thing about the incompetence of people like Pluff and Cutter and, Dylan, that their incompetence is bred by a certain ideology. That sort of ideology breeds a certain type of incompetence, because it's just, there's a lot of CYA and there's a lot of like, well, what can you do?
Right, because it's kind of accountability free. Like the bigger risk would be losing to the left than losing to Republicans that over their entire career. So that's really molded them. It's what's so stunning about their belief that they were going to be able to run Biden again was that the only reason they were able to run him that time was
because of COVID
scenario, and then COVID. Mid-March, we didn't see him again through November.
That was the best thing that could have ever happened to his campaign was
Biden in the basement.
I can't leave, because of COVID. And on some level, like that.
And Trump being the actual president and everybody wanting him out.
Yeah.
So they had those two things going for them, and they had zero of those things going for him. And they had him 40 years older than he was.
Right.
So how they thought they were going to be able to force that down people's throats is beyond me.
I don't know if we can calculate the cost of Biden's inability to use the bully pulpit, especially in the communications environment that we live in now. Why AOC is potent, which is what I said to her, and why Trump is. They are trying to talk to you directly, and Trump's lying by Truth Social or whatever. But it feels to voters like a level of responsiveness that a guy like Biden, who didn't say anything publicly, basically, for the final 2 years of his presidency, they didn't feel that on top of all of the other reasons that we talk about with him. And, no president ever gotten reelected with his approval rating, and it bore out.
And he was the most economic populist president we've had since probably FDR, and he never said a word about it, or he never said a word that anybody could like absorb,
could understand.
This is the paradox, right? Like, because you read that piece in the Journal and you start to wonder, like, okay, his administration was the most populist, certainly of our time, and the value. This is frankly like why, like, I was like, I'm happy. I don't. If we have a Reagan situation, and I think the Reagan situation is very analogous to this on some level, except for, Reagan was, it was almost like built in that Reagan was going to be a little bit like that. And, whatever. It was a different era in terms of like exposure. If it was 50 years ago and there's only 3 stations, Biden could have maybe won again, in that environment. The Reagan era, you just had some of the worst players in U.S. government were basically running the ship, and he was not.
Yeah. So I think you're right.
With Biden, we had, early on, he farmed out antitrust to Elizabeth Warren. He farmed out labor to Bernie Sanders. And he basically farmed out, and we didn't,
Ron Klain's running the show.
Yes, he farmed out foreign policy to Dick Cheney, essentially. And I maybe not literally, but certainly
McGurk
pretty close.
Jake Sullivan.
And these people are of that ilk. And then just like, everything was just try and have as many good days as you can.
It says in the piece in 2021 that an aide said to the other, he has good days and bad days.
Yes.
And then he wasn't receiving the polling information. It wasn't clear because the pollsters weren't allowed to talk to him directly in 2024.
It doesn't sound like
it could process
it. But my point is like, short of who he farmed out foreign policy to, I'm okay with a caretaker presidency, like as in there needs to be a caretaker for the president, and other people are doing the actual stuff because he had basically given it out to different people. But that it turns out you also got to run for president.
Yeah, and one piece of evidence that it wasn't really him running it, because this wasn't his politics for the 60 years or whatever that he's been in politics, and that phrase that they use to describe his populist economics, from the middle out, it makes no sense. Nobody understands what it means. You focus group it, people are like, what is this? What? But I think Biden liked it because he's middle class Joe. He calls himself that, and so I think they framed the economic politics that they wanted to run as this middle out to him. Like, he was the only audience, I think, for that ridiculous brand that they put on it. And they're like, all right, if we can get Joe bought in by calling it middle out, let's just call it middle out, and then we'll do our thing.
Same
Are
with
you guys doing the middle out? Hey man, where's the
same with foreign policy for the middle class? Remember that? That was how Jake Sullivan sold his foreign policy. Foreign policy for the middle class.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Makes
They're
sense,
invested in arms dealers?
It means that, like, when we're hawkish on China.
One person.
Yeah, right. Well, right, exactly. You're right. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't really make sense. It just lands in his brain, and a light goes off. And he hears the word middle class.
Yeah, I mean, he must have been like, God damn it. I've been doing this for 60 years and I never thought of that. Damn it.
How generous of you to assume he had the thought.
No, damn it. That sounds good.
Yeah. People are going to love this. Oh, and the other piece of
Hunter,
evidence,
get in here.
He was always calling Larry Summers for advice. Larry Summers was completely shut out by his entire economic policy team because they thought all of his ideas were incorrect, like a Kramer style. Whatever he says, let's do the opposite.
Right.
Yet Biden would talk to him regularly. But then his whatever he told Biden would just be completely ignored. So I think that's another indication that was just the way they placated Biden. Like, all right, it's called middle out, and Larry Summers likes it. Here, talk to Larry. And Larry would tell him, just don't do all the things that your team
do. You want to read the latest
do
Matt Iglesias piece, Mr. President? Here, look at this.
Yes.
And Micah and Joe, they look so good today, don't they?
They're my friends.
All right. So Ryan, this is our final live show of the year. And we've talked about the now sort of like not theoretical, but we've reached oligarchic stage, like in a very obvious fashion, I think. And we've talked about the fecklessness of the Democrats and the fact that we had a pretend president for 4 years. Positive note. What's going to be positive in 2025?
So, AOC, I think you got a little bit of news out of AOC there that could be in a positive direction that I could underline. When she said that as she was running for ranking member, the case that she made to the caucus was that she would lead with economic populism, and that she is very good at messaging around economic populism. And she was contrasting that with leading around the cultural politics. That's why she said, that's why she followed it in your interview by saying, don't worry.
I'm still
multiracial coalition.
It's like, whenever you start saying that, it's clear you de-emphasized it. And she's specifically saying that she's de-emphasizing that and re-emphasizing the economic politics, economic populism. And, I think that's a good thing. It's no secret. That's what I've always felt. I think that you actually will win the cultural fights by winning those fights. Like, I think you fight and lose on the cultural fights, then you lose them both. You have to fight on the economic populism, and then you win them both.
Yep.
I definitely saw it in the context of when I mentioned Pat Ryan and said immigration, because I just happen to know, like, I'm familiar with Pat Ryan.
That's your man, right?
No, I mean, I'm the 19th. He's the 18th. If he was the 19th for a brief moment, but he used to do regular interviews on on the radio station I listened to up there via the internet. It's very effective. And when he was county supervisor. And, he is I think definitely has the sensibility of an economic populist. I think he's probably more to the left in general than he is as a, politician. He's a vet. His immigration stance, I'm not terribly thrilled about. He got, and that was really the one that probably the one position that he held that I don't subscribe to. In New York State, it's a very difficult environment right now for that, because of the way that Hochul and Adams I mean, it's been framed that way, and Swazi's win,
Right.
that's like you're really swimming against the tide. But he ran on two things in terms of what his mass media was: Social Security, protecting Social Security, and abortion rights. And, Social Security is the Democratic populist message. That's where it all emanates from, it seems to me. You want to expand Social Security, there's you understand the value of a universal program and getting everybody involved, and you understand the value of like mandates and all of this. All of the sort of like Democratic populist measures are manifested through Social Security. And I think like we're watching the maturation of a politician. It's just, hopefully it's not like the maturation process is not like a Nancy Pelosi maturation process, right? I mean, but I don't know if San Francisco was ever about populism, even 40 years ago when it wasn't like it is today in terms of where the money is.
Right. And she always represented the establishment wing of the San Francisco Democratic Party against its more insurgent wing anyway.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm trying to sum up your positive message. So
Some
AOC's
Democrats are going to lean into
Economic
your
populism.
Wow, that's really
real
tepid.
concerns.
That's
Yeah.
really tepid. That's a very tepid positive message for 2025. Anything else? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think they're already talking about, candidates for 2028. So the idea that 2024 is going to be the last presidential election, I think we can probably put that fear to rest. I think we're going to have more elections. So that's something.
That's good to hear.
That's good to know.
But
yeah.
it's still, 4 years away. They haven't even taken the oath of office yet. So I'm not sure we can bank that. But as Edward Gregorian says on our IMs, this is why they call him Ryan Grimm. And Ryan, Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great
Always a pleasure.
2024. Folks should check out Drop Site News. You guys have been breaking stories, it feels like, every week.
Yeah, a lot of good. We're on a roll. A lot of big.
really
hits.
are.
Yeah, good Cuba piece coming today. You'll like.
Oh,
All right. So, folks, check out Drop Site News. And Ryan, have a great holiday
You too.
and good New Year. And we'll see you in 2025.
All right, see you there.
All right. Thanks.
see you, Ryan.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.